Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing yet another movie review. This movie is a horror comedy from Canada, English language, released in the year 2019, directed by Rob Grant, and this film is called Harpoon. So Harpoon follows three friends. You've got a woman, her boyfriend, who's a very psychotic individual. He's got a very, very nasty temper, and the main character. Now the main character at the start of the film, basically this boyfriend, he comes over to visit this main character, and he belts the living daylights out of him, and this main character has no idea why, but it appears that the boyfriend believes the main character is sleeping with his girlfriend. So when the girlfriend straightens things out, it turns out it's a massive misunderstanding. So the boyfriend feels very guilty about this. He wants to keep the friendship going and he wants to stay with his girlfriend, and so he wants to make it up to them. So he says that he's going to invite them out on his yacht. They're going to go in the middle of the ocean, they're going to have a good time, and he's just begging for their forgiveness. So the main character and the girl, they decide to accept this. They're going to try and make him feel as guilty as possible and try and get a few things from him. But then when they get out into the ocean, bad things happen when the boat is basically broken, and now they're stranded in the middle of nowhere. But to add further complications, the boyfriend starts to believe that maybe he was onto something in the first place, that maybe it wasn't such a misunderstanding, and his temper is starting to grow again, which is ultimately going to put the cat amongst the pigeons. And so their situation is about to go from bad to worse, and they're stranded in the middle of nowhere. There is no help whatsoever. So whether or not each and every one of them can get back on shore alive is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Harpoon. For the majority of this film, I thought it was very self-aware, and I thought it capitalised on all the strengths that the movie possessed. But unfortunately, this is a film that really falls victim to modern necessities as far as cinema is concerned. Now what I mean by modern necessities is twists. Now, ever since M. Night Shyamalan shocked us all with the twist in the Sixth Sense, every other movie has to try and emulate that. And unfortunately with Harpoon, the movie didn't need the twist, because the movie had a strong sense of intensity that was growing, and it was snowballing to something that was going to basically explode and illuminate the sky. But unfortunately the twist, it does take a lot of the momentum out of the film, and that was unfortunate, because I thought as though the movie had a lot of self-awareness, but it didn't have self-awareness when it needed it most. And that's something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I really liked about Harpoon was that it really juggled comedy and horror very well. There were horrifying elements to this film. It's a very brutal film. It's the characters, I thought, especially the boyfriend, he was a very psychotic individual, and his father was a very psychotic individual. You don't see his father in the film, but you hear about his family. So I was never quite sure what he would do if he flew off the deep end. At the start of the film, we know that he is capable of extreme violence, but when they're out in the yacht, I felt as though if this secret is starting to come out and questions are starting to be answered, he was starting to become angrier and angrier. And I thought, all right, well, that's strong suspense. That's a strong sense of intensity, because if so-and-so was doing something with the other person, then all of a sudden, okay, it's not being stranded in the ocean that's their only problem. It's ultimately, is this guy going to fly off the deep end, and is he going to get violent again? And so how are they going to combat that, this girlfriend and this main character? And so I thought, all right, well, there are a lot of ingredients that are really working well with each other. And so you've got that horrifying element, then you've got the comedy element. And I thought the comedy was very dark, but it was actually really well done. It was very quirky. Straight away, this boyfriend is smashing the living daylights out of this main character, and then all of a sudden he thinks to himself, I've made a mistake, and he's trying to make it up to them. And I thought that was very quirky, and immediately you've got that sense of dark comedy. And so not only with the start of the film was it funny, I thought there were elements, there's a narration that I thought was really funny as well, and the way that the three interacted with each other, I thought the chemistry was there, but the chemistry was there in a caricature nature. I thought, all right, well, there are some really dark things going on, but I couldn't help but laugh, because the script was actually really capable of producing laughs, and that's something you don't see every day. So the horror and the comedy was juggled very finely, and not one genre outweighed the other. So as far as a horror comedy is concerned, I definitely think the director really nailed it in both departments, which is something I really liked. I really liked the setting. This is a minimalistic horror film. This is a movie that relies on one setting, which is basically this boat, and it's a movie that relies on three characters. And so it's not a film that's extravagant, and it's not a movie that's trying too much. Therefore, it's more emphasis on the acting performances and more emphasis on creating that sense of atmosphere based on the setting that it is. And I think that once again, the director really nailed it. I thought the acting performances were great, because the script allowed these actors to produce interesting characters, and I thought the setting, being in the middle of the ocean, no help around, it gave it that sense of desperation and that claustrophobia that I thought worked really well. So it's a psychological horror film, but at the same time very nasty. There's a lot of practical sort of violence that this movie possesses that really shocked me. I really wasn't expecting what actually happens, and because the violence is few and far between, it hits you very hard, and it's the sense of impending doom that I thought was really good. And there's also another sort of element to this movie that I thought was really fun as well. I'm not going to give anything away, but it's basically what they were facing, and you can the narration that this film has, it tells stories, classic stories of people being stranded. And so I don't want to give too much away, but I thought that, again, worked really well, which is ultimately why I was so disappointed of the modern necessity of filmmakers these days, is that they need a twist. But the movie didn't need a twist. The movie was snowballing to something really, really good, and the intensity was getting higher and higher and higher. But then all of a sudden, towards the end, there's a twist, and this twist is very common. This is a twist that I actually saw coming. I was hoping that it wasn't coming because, as I said, it didn't need this. But when the twist comes, I thought it kind of alleviates the pressure that the movie has building. And because this twist is right near the end, it takes time to get the momentum going again, but then all of a sudden it's finished. And so I thought that the wick that was slowly burning for the explosion was getting greater and greater, and I thought I was getting more and more excited. But then all of a sudden, that moment of intensity stops. And so when you've got the twist, the movie takes a different route, and the movie needs, again, to give you that slow progression of intensity. But unfortunately, because it's towards the end, it doesn't give itself time to get that intensity. So I thought, all right, well, I was bigging myself up for something that doesn't really happen. And in the end, what you get is a movie that takes a different route, but because it's near the end, it doesn't have time to capitalize on, once again, that intensity that the twist brings. And so I thought, all right, it was a nasty way to finish the film. It was the right at the end, I thought, was fairly decent, but I just thought as though it would have been a lot better if it was a lot more simple, because it really had something going in the first 3/4 of this movie. But when the twist comes, it kind of alleviates that intensity, and because it's over before you know it after that, it just doesn't give itself time to build a new sense of intensity. And so I thought it would have been better if it stayed away from that sort of modern necessity that filmmakers have these days, because I just couldn't help but feel it would have been so much better if it had a much more simplistic approach. But it just, as I said, films these days, they need a twist for whatever reason, I don't know. But this movie, I thought it was very self-aware for the first 3/4, but then for some reason, it decided to be like every other film, and unfortunately that lack of self-awareness right at the end really prevents it from being an absolutely fantastic film. But having said that, it's still a movie I would highly recommend if you are a fan of horror comedies. It will make you laugh, and it will actually make you feel creeped out, and will shock you with the violence, and so it is definitely better than a lot of lower budget horror comedies going out there. So overall, it's not a bad film at all. It was actually a movie I really enjoyed, but I just couldn't help but feel it should have been an absolutely fantastic film if it had the self-awareness for the completion of this movie. So overall for Harpoon, going to give it 3.5 stars. Still go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.